Hey everyone, welcome back. You ready for this? We're doing something a little different this time, a deep dive into, get this, the world of conservation.
Ooh, conservation.
Hold on, before you start picturing rainforests and endangered species, we're taking a turn into art, history. Think more like those ancient artifacts you see in museums, and even something like your grandma's antique furniture could fall into this category, right?
Yeah, like what survives the years and how.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And to help us navigate this, we've got a stack of RoleCatcher career guides right here. And let me tell you, these things are packed with info. So should be interesting to see what we learn about this line of work.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this.
So first things first, who were these protectors of the past? What does a conservator actually do all day?
Well, if these role catcher guides are on point, it seems like they're the ones who make sure those irreplaceable pieces of history actually stick around for all of us in the future, right? They're the ones examining, documenting, cleaning, stabilizing. Basically, they're like doctors for anything from like you said, ancient sculptures to centuries old documents even.
Okay, so hold on. We're talking about potentially handling like seriously priceless artifacts here. That's going to be a ton of pressure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one wrong move and boom, irreversible damage, right? And honestly, it might not always be glamorous. Like, picture yourself meticulously cleaning a third century mosaic piece, tiny little piece.
No.
But there's that other side of it, that sense of purpose, you know? Like you're preserving a real tangible piece of the past. And that's a big part of what draws people to this field from what I hear.
Right, they can see that. Okay, so it's not all like Indiana Jones excitement.
Right.
But let's talk about where this is all happening. What kind of environment are we looking at here? Is this a white gloves in a museum basement kind of deal? Or are there some curveballs?
See, that's what I find interesting. The work environment, it's actually super diverse. You could be in a climate-controlled lab analyzing paint pigments one day, and the next you're on-site at a cathedral figuring out weather damage to, like, centuries-old stained glass.
Wow, so scratch the stuffy office image. This sounds like a career for someone who's adaptable, not just good with their hands. Now, RoleCatcher also mentions needing some pretty specific skills to really make it in this field. A strong background in art history, sure, that makes sense, but I was caught off guard by how much they emphasize chemistry.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised too when I saw that, but it makes sense when you think about it. Like, let's say you're trying to authenticate a historical painting. They've got to figure out if it's the real deal or a clever fake, right? So, conservators are in the lab analyzing paint pigments at a molecular level to see how old they really are, where they came from, the whole nine yards. It's basically detective work, but with a historical twist.
That's so cool. So it's not just about, like, appreciating art, it's about understanding the science behind it, the literal building blocks of these objects. And speaking of building blocks, RoleCatcher seems to think technology is a huge E factor these days. Anything in there that surprised you?
Oh, tons. Like 3D scanning, for instance. We're not just talking about making cool replicas anymore. This is next level stuff. Think about being able to analyze an object's structure without even having to touch it. You can discover hidden details about how it was made, even spot forgeries, all thanks to this technology.
Wow, so it's not just about protecting the past, it's also about uncovering its secrets, right? I mean, that's way more high-tech than I ever would have guessed.
I know, right? It's seriously opening up some incredible opportunities for research and restoration that we could only dream about before. But here's the thing, even with all this amazing technology at our fingertips, the core of conservation, that heart of it, it all comes back to a deep respect for the past and a real commitment to saving it for the future, you know?
Yeah, and speaking of the future, that's actually something these role catcher guides go into, like the whole career path thing. If you were thinking about becoming a conservator.
Okay, so let's say someone is listening and they're like, sign me up. They love history, they've always been good with their hands, maybe even have a little at-home chemistry set they tinker with. Where do they even begin? What are the typical first steps into this world?
Well, it looks like a lot of folks start with internships, or maybe assistant positions, getting that hands-on experience under the wing of someone who's been there, done that.
Makes sense. Probably a steep learning curve in those early years.
Right.
Oh, for sure. You're mastering these super delicate techniques, learning to spot different materials, understanding how they age and react to things, all while working with incredibly valuable, one-of-a-kind objects. But there's another side to it, too. RoleCatcher makes a point of saying that those early roles, that's where you build the foundation for leadership down the line.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about like the technical stuff. It's about developing that eye for detail, being able to make judgment calls when things get tricky.
Exactly. And as you move up, those decisions, they only get tougher. Imagine being in charge of a team that's restoring a tapestry that's like centuries old. You've got technical puzzles to solve, sure, but you're also managing people, budgets, deadlines, the whole shebang.
Whoa. Talk about pressure. And RoleCatcher kind of hinted that getting your foot in the door, it's not a walk in the park. Any tips from them on standing out in what I'm guessing is a pretty competitive job market?
They're big on having a killer portfolio. Like, it's non-negotiable. It's how you show off what you can do, your attention to detail, that you really care about this stuff. And of course, networking, can't forget that. They mention organizations like the American Institute for Conservation. Those are gold mines for connecting with other people in the field, hearing about job openings before anyone else.
So it's a mix of like letting your skills speak for themselves and also putting yourself out there making those connections, right?
100%. And RoleCatcher stresses how important it is to tailor your applications, you know? It's not enough to be like, oh, I just really love history. You got to show them you get their thing, what that specific museum or institution is all about.
Yeah, prove you did your homework, went beyond the generic stuff.
Exactly. And even though experience is obviously huge, RoleCatcher is all about never stopping learning. Workshops, conferences, keeping up with all the new technology. It's a field that's always changing, always growing.
Makes sense, especially with how fast technology moves these days. Speaking of, they had a whole section on virtual reality, and let me tell you, it's not what I was expecting.
Oh, I know, right? It's mind-blowing. Picture this. You could put on a VR headset and actually peel back the layers of a fresco that's been damaged, like see the original artwork underneath. It's like time travel, but for art.
Whoa, that's insane. So we're not even just preserving the past anymore. We're finding ways to, like, experience it in ways that were impossible before.
Exactly. And get this. This tech is changing how conservators train and work together, too. Imagine specialists from all over the world, they can put on these headsets, and suddenly they're inside a 3D model of some damaged artifact, sharing their knowledge and figuring out how to fix it, all virtually.
Dude, that sounds like it's straight out of a movie.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It just goes to show how much this field is changing, how it's blending those traditional hands-on skills with the latest tech.
All right, so let's switch gears for a second and talk about the interview process, because I'm guessing it's probably pretty intense. What kind of questions should someone be ready for, according to RoleCatcher?
Get ready for some curveballs. Seriously, they're not just going to quiz you on your technical chops. They want to see how you think, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what are your ethics? How do you handle pressure? That kind of stuff.
So, Liz, what's your go-to preservation technique? And more like, okay, you've got limited resources and a bunch of artifacts at risk. How do you choose?
Exactly. RoleCatcher actually gives some examples. Like they ask, tell us about a time you had to make a tough ethical decision during a conservation project. They want to see you think on your feet, balance those preservation ideals with what's actually possible in the real world.
They're searching for people who aren't just passionate, but also, like, grounded and adaptable.
Totally. This isn't just some job, it's a calling, you know? You need that deep respect for history, that fire in your belly to save these pieces of our shared story before they're gone for good.
It really makes you think about, like, the weight of all that, right? I mean, those decisions they have to make, it's not just about the object itself.
It's true. It's like we're talking about objects, yeah, but they're more than that. They carry stories, cultures, sometimes even political power, right? So when a conservator is looking at something, they have to think about all of that.
Right. It's not just a, how do we fix this? It's a, what are we saving and why?
Exactly. And RoleCatcher, they don't shy away from that at all. They actually emphasize how this field, it's not just about being good with your hands. It's way bigger than that.
Totally. Yeah. It's like a whole other way of looking at history, at art.
Yeah, and how
Yeah.
we connect to it, you need that deep knowledge of history, obviously, but also like cultural awareness, even a bit of philosophical thinking, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, what stories are we choosing to save? And then how do we even make sure those stories make sense to people way in the future?
Man, that's something else to think about. We could go on about that for hours. But for now, as we're wrapping up our little deep dive here into this whole world of conservation, what would you say, like, if someone's listening, what's the one thing they should take away from all of this?
That's a good one. I guess for me, it all comes back to this idea that protecting our history, it's not just a job for specialists, it's something we all share.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like you might not be out there restoring a Michelangelo painting, but we can all appreciate those stories these objects hold, the skills it takes to care for them, and just how much the world's changing around them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we covered some serious ground today, that's for sure. I mean, from those like super detailed techniques to the ethical stuff we talked about,
Yeah.
and of course, all that mind-blowing technology.
Right. It's been quite a ride, but honestly, this is like the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole universe of amazing stories out there, successes, failures, you name it, all tied to this idea of conservation.
So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired, feeling like they want to learn more, where should they even start?
Honestly, just go explore. Visit a museum, find a lecture, or even see if, like, your local historical society needs volunteers.
Yeah, get your hands dirty, right?
Exactly. You never know what you might discover.
Love it. Well, on that note, thanks for diving deep with us today, everyone. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll see you on the flip side.